I'm Hearne. I'm an artist from Dublin, but I live in Wexford now. And I just want to start off by saying, actually I want to start off by saying if anyone has any questions at any point or wants to stop me and ask a question at any stage, I'm actually totally cool with that. But I just want to sort of mark something here. I spent a lot of my life as a painter and decorator. I'm from a family of painters and decorators. And I did my degree in Nottingham Trent University in the late 90s, and then I worked as a photographer's assistant. My degree was in fine art photography, late 90s, and came back to Ireland and worked as a photographer's assistant for a few years. And and kind of in tandem with that, I was trying to get my art practice off the ground a bit, and it was kind of not really happening. And my dad ran a quite thriving painting and decorating business, and it was always part of my life. But he sort of said to me in my mid-20s, he was like, do you want to come on board? It was mid-late 20s really, I suppose I was 28 or something. Do you want to come on board and help me run the business and all that kind of thing? So I kind of made this very rash decision at the time to leave my art practice on the shelf kind of thing and go in and run the business with him. He actually died then in 2005, and I ended up like fully taking the business over. So from kind of 2005 to 2018, I was running that business with my sister, and we ran we did quite big jobs, and one of our clients was the Lane actually. And I remember sitting on this floor in my painter's overalls, and I think it was 2018, it was just after my master's. I had kind of really enjoyed my master's in NCAD 2014 to 2016, and I was running the business at the same time. And during my master's I was like, right, this is it, I have to get back into full-time being an artist. And I was grappling with running the business, trying to be an artist, and in 2018 we decided to close the business down. But I think it was 2017, I think-ish, I was sitting on the floor here with my painter's overalls on, cutting in the bottoms of these skirtings, and I remember just sort of stopping and thinking, fuck my life, what am I doing? And I have to stop this. And this photograph here actually is from a job we were doing in Emma, and this was for the Vivian Dick and Nan Golden exhibition, which was 2017-18, I think, as well. So this was kind of coming to the end of that kind of dual world where I was running a business and trying to get a career as an artist off the ground. So I started, like, I closed down the business in 2018, and I was like full time into trying to get my career off the ground, and things really kind of happened then. But just to go back into the painting and decorating, and just something, while I was preparing for this talk, I really realised that in my practice, in everything I do, there's these polar opposites, these kind of positive and negative, where I really love and hate materials I'm using, the mediums that I'm working in. I have these really kind of like fraught relationships with like the medium of photography, painting and decorating industry, and then the issues that I deal with, which are around things around the kind of Roman Catholic Church, my homosexuality, all those kind of things. So I have these very fraught relationships with all these elements that kind of make up my art practice and probably life, I suppose. So it's a very kind of like cut and dry, I love it or I hate it. So with the painting and decorating business, my dad ran that from as early as I can remember. There was paint and the stuff of painting and decorating industry around the house. The business was run from the house, and there was an office that my dad worked out of in one of the front rooms, and then there was a shed down the back which housed all the materials, all the kind of paint and the ladders and all this kind of stuff. And it was a really, and the more I think about that aspect, just the shed. I'll go on to other things now, but it's just the shed thing. It was actually right beside my bedroom. It was kind of a big bungalow we lived in, and the shed was next to my bedroom, but you had to kind of go out of the house, go into another door. But in that shed, it was a really magical place. To someone else's eyes, it was an absolute dump. But to me, as a young kid, as a teenager, I always kind of fell into there, and I was always like pulling skins off hardened oil paint buckets and sloshing paint around the walls, like kind of Jackson Pollock, kind of like frenzied, and just like opening tins and just splashing them on the walls. And it never felt like I was doing something or making artwork or trying to like make a painting on the wall or anything. It was just playing with the actual stuff, which was the kind of smelly, dirty kind of paint. And I was never discouraged from doing it, which was really weird, because I used to kind of wreck the place. But that was a magical place, and like I've no photographs of it, which makes me quite sad, but I always kind of went in there. The house that I grew up in I have four sisters and two brothers, and it was just a wild house. There was a lot going on, so I think I used to go into that shed just for a bit of like peace of mind or something. But that shed and what it represents and how it looked, the kind of mess of it, the kind of possibilities for playing in there with colour, playing in there with paint, playing with materials, and I think is really kind of like the bedrock of a lot of what I do now. So because of my father's business, and I suppose I was kind of forced into working in the business from during school holidays, holidays from college and stuff. So every summer, Christmas was spent on jobs, and those jobs could be hospitals, they could have been like government buildings, office buildings, suburban houses, that kind of thing. So it was quite mixed. So with that as well, so there's I was forced into working in with his employees from a young age, and kind of realising I was gay from an early age. From like maybe 13, I started realising I was gay and I was attracted to men and all that kind of thing. And this was kind of, you have to keep in mind, this was kind of 90s. I was going into these very macho, football-loving lads, beer-swilling lads and stuff, and I was going in there very unsure about my sexuality. Well, actually, I wasn't unsure about it. I was very sure about it, actually, but very kind of afraid to be kind of found out, maybe. So it was a kind of weird. I felt going into those environments quite guarded and closed down. So I kind of hated working and being forced into work, but I had to do it anyway. But I suppose the polar opposite of that, I was in these buildings, I was in these different interiors, and from Georgian buildings, from kind of like 1980s suburban houses to kind of hospitals and stuff. So, and you know, you're going in, you're painting, you're changing colours, you're stripping wallpaper, you're hanging wallpaper. I think that is kind of where the penny kind of dropped as to how powerful colour and decoration is to an interior, and the power it has to change the tempo of a space. And that was quite important, and I think it really fostered a love of interior design and interiors and interior architecture in that time. So I suppose there's, and just to kind of conclude that, there was a negative and positive, and there was negative in that I felt like a fish out of water in those very masculine kind of spaces. I wasn't out, but then it fostered this major love of interior architecture, decoration, all that kind of thing. And then it was the 80s as well. Well, I suppose the 80s into the 90s, when we had these really weird decoration kind of effects brought into play, like, you know, like rag rolling, stippling, all these special paint effects were really like popular, very kind of fluoro kind of colours, like peaches and mint greens and pinks and all these kind of colours. So I kind of really loved them. But what you found in the kind of later 90s was colours became very taupe and very creams and stuff. And colour became less of a thing, and that kind of bothered me. But I loved, and I still love, the aesthetics of the 80s, all that kind of interior decor trends that were around at the time. Where the polar opposites come in again is with photography. So I studied photography in the Nottingham Trent University in the kind of mid to late 90s, and it was a fine art photography course, and at that time it was before Photoshop, before the digital age really kicked in. So I kind of learned photography deep in the at the end of the analog age, I suppose. But when I learned, it was, you know, dark rooms, shooting on film. There was a lot of engagement with the materials of photography. In that, you know, you took a photograph on film and you had to process the film. There was chemicals involved, there was smells, there was dirt, your hands were getting dirty. There was a lot of magic involved in it. So that really cemented my love for the medium of photography. And I worked quite ferociously in college and actually the themes are similar to what I'm working on now, the kind of preoccupation with the Roman Catholic Church. So there has been a thread there. So I worked with this medium and this wet, dirty, lovely medium that I loved. And then after college, you know, this digital medium started kicking in, Photoshop, digital cameras, point and shoot, you hook your camera up to the computer and print out. So I kind of became very despondent with the medium, and I started to really, really dislike it. And hate would be a kind of word I'd use because I felt very divorced from it or something. I kind of stopped kind of taking photographs as much. And then I suppose it was the time came when I was working in the business and running the business, so I wasn't taking pictures as much. But then fast forward to when camera phones and stuff came out, and that reignited something in me as well, the immediacy, the quality of digital cameras on the phones became better. Social media was also another way you could produce and put images out straight away. So I kind of became giddy with that whole new kind of world, which is probably like 2008, 2010, and I started using camera phones and stuff a lot. So then another polar opposite, I suppose growing up in the 80s and 90s, the Roman Catholic Church were coming to I suppose they were kind of screaming their last kind of gasps and kind of starting to come out of favour. I mean, stories of the institutional sexual abuse and the kind of slavery, the way people were held in mothers and babies' homes, all those kind of things, all those stories were really tumbling into the newspapers, and that was everywhere. I felt it everywhere. There was newspapers around the house all the time, and I would pick them up, and every day there'd be a different story about some kind of abuse or some kind of scandal. And then in tandem with that, then anytime you would go to Mass, which we didn't go to Mass as a family much, but if you did, there was also, and that the AIDS crisis was coming out as well in the mid-80s, there was also, I found churches and the pulpit to be highly homophobic, and priests would use every opportunity to kind of decry homophobia or homosexuality, and yeah, that was everywhere. That definitely impacted me, I suppose, at coming of age and trying to come to terms with my sexuality and trying to, you know, be out and trying to kind of be myself was very, very difficult. And I do attribute that to the kind of environment that the Roman Catholic Church kind of put out there, and how that seeped into Irish society. What else was I going to say about that? So I have this rage and bewilderment at the Roman Catholic Church, the power they wielded, the horrific history within Ireland, and I suppose I naively thought, I was very preoccupied with it at the time, but I naively thought in my kind of late teens, that this is the kind of last gasp, and this is all they're going to get their comeuppance, it's all going to be sorted out. They're going to kind of die off, and they didn't really. So I suppose the abuse scandals kept, like they're still tumbling out to this day, like, 30 years later. But it was like a tsunami kept coming. And, even to this day, they haven't provided proper redress. I was still dealing with all these issues in my work then, and we're kind of fast forwarding on to like the referendums of 2005, the same-sex marriage referendum, and then to the more recent 2018 repeal the eighth. And the Catholic Church, from my observation, were kind of like, they'd kind of gone into the background a little bit. They weren't as vocal, but in the run-up to the same-sex marriage referendum, they were really out in force, and they were telling me and people like me that we would never be part of a family. We're intrinsically disordered. All these, like, it was a horrific time actually, but I was doing my master's at the time, and it really was the positive of that. The polar opposite of that was I was outraged, but I was like, really, like, this is fucking great content and great stuff to process and to kind of make work about. And I felt very compelled then to make work around all this. And so there's all this politics of the Catholic Church, which is, like, frankly disgusting, and really it's a misogynistic organisation. It's a patriarchal organisation, and they want to keep gay, trans women out, and they're doing a very good job of that still. But so I have this absolute horror at them, and I find them horrifying. But on the other hand, then, I really appreciate the visual culture of the Catholic Church, be that churches, church interiors, the lavish costumes of a figure like this, Cardinal Raymo, who I'll talk about in a second. The lavish costumes, the interiors, the decoration, all that visual culture. And I'm really, really into like church interiors. I'm really interested. Well, I suppose you have to start off by thinking of a church interior as like vast and huge, and it's like the biggest space, one of the biggest spaces you'll ever be in, and there's a lot of awe-inspiring sublimeness about that. And it can make you feel very small, which I think they do a very, very good job at. But there's a tension in churches, which I'm really interested in as well, which is like the beautiful marbles, like the mosaics, the colours and stuff, and there can be quite ugly elements within it as well. And I find there's a clash in churches. There can be this very awe-inspiring beauty of the stained glasses, and then there can be like a little side altar with a little horrible bunch of flowers that are half dead and mixed with plastic flowers, but they're against this really opulent background. So I love when I see these little ugly, horrible bits within a church against the beauty. I can't describe what that does, or if there's any kind of academic research behind, or if there's something, behind all that, but I just know what it does to me. And I try and kind of hone in on that in my work as well, that kind of element, that kind of tension between ugliness and beauty. So I spoke there about painting and decorating, and photography, and my love-hate with those two mediums, if you will. So when I was doing my master's, I was like, right, I've been away from education for so long, I need to just get back in. I come from a photography background, I have to I remember having this conversation with myself, I have to just conclude what I'd learned with photography in the decades beforehand, and try and bring something new and fresh into photography, and try and work within the boundaries of photography. So I set that stupidly to myself to try and just keep it kind of very contained within that medium. But I suppose because I was running the business at the same time, and paint was a big thing in my life. It was obviously paint is in my bones, so there was always paint around. So I just very naturally started bringing paint into my studio, and like paint would become a background for a portrait I was doing. Like I'd paint the background first, or I'd do some special paint effect. And I found I was getting more joy out of that action, making a set, rather than taking the photograph and processing the photograph. And I started using wallpapers then. In my master show, I did a big wallpaper installation, photographed material on wallpaper, and did a big collage out of that. So photography and paint were really merged on my masters in a really nice way for me, because I needed, and what I realised afterwards, I needed that kind of engagement with materials. I needed to be building something, making something, having a very active kind of engagement in an installation or in any work I was making, like as in physical, and that physical engagement I was looking for was something I was getting when I was painting and decorating. So there's something there as well. But I just wasn't happy with just taking photographs and printing them out and putting them in frames and putting them on the wall. That wasn't satisfying to me at all. So most recent project I've been working on, and the most recent series of exhibitions and works, and I call this the Raymo series. So Raymo is Cardinal Raymo Burke. And he is a very interesting character. He's an American cardinal, and he's very problematic. He's very, very, very hardcore, very misogynistic, very homophobic, ultra traditional. It's been said about him that he's the de facto leader of the church's conservative wing, which is scary enough. I mean, the church is scary enough with being ultra conservative, and he sort of feeds into a lot of what we're seeing now in the States, where we have this rise of evangelicalism. And he's just ultra conservative. He had a recent quote from him, which is just from last month, and he was talking about the wars in Ukraine and the Holy Land, as he called it. He says, "These wars, terrible wars in the Holy Land, Ukraine, and the ever-increasing practices against human life and against the family." So he's sort of lumping these terrible wars, and he's lumping gay people, he's lumping abortion and all in with these wars. And we see there, he's talking about the Holy Land, and he doesn't mention Palestine. So I came across him during the pandemic, actually, just through research. Came across him online, and I started researching about him more and more and more. And his politics obviously disgust me, but this is actually his outfits, his presentation is bonkers. Now, this is a very toned down version, but I would really recommend checking him out on YouTube, or checking him out, because he is quite a funny character. He doesn't put himself out to be funny. I think he's hilarious. He's really into these very flamboyant gowns, they're really they're the red, but they're the kind of wood grain moire silks, and there's massive trains that are meters and meters, 20 meters, 30 meters long, and really ornate silks, and really bejeweled gloves, and even during some of his sermons, there's costume changes where the altar boys will come up as part of some ritual or ceremony, and they'll change the outfit. There'll be layers and layers and layers of cloaks and coats and undergarments and stuff. So there's these videos on YouTube where the altar boys are changing them, and there's smoke billowing around and all this. So it's hilarious. So I found him I found him actually a bit of a joke, actually, because I found it kind of drag. I found it was very the tradition of drag, where we really dress up and go, and very over the top. So there's this tension between his presentation and his politics, and I just got really, really interested in him from there. And this was all during the pandemic, and I started. Actually, I don't know how it started, but I started writing letters to him not to him to post to him, but I don't know why I did this, but I sat down and wrote a letter. So I started writing letters to him, and just like, I only realised what I was doing afterwards. I was doing it to generate ideas and to build a kind of world around him. And through this letter, writing this letter, then I became a character and he became a character. So we were kind of like characters in this fictional world that was based on some kind of fact. So this letter and some of the next letter as well. When I wrote this letter, I was like, wow, there's so much in this vitriol coming from my point of view. This attack on him was quite powerful. I wrote the next letter, and then the next letter was more apologetic. It was like, oh my God, I'm so sorry for being so rude and so mean to you. And as I was writing that letter, then I started being kind of very loving towards him. I think you're an amazing man. It's just because I'm jealous of you. This is why I'm being so horrible to you. And I professed my love to him by the end of the second letter. So around that time, then I'd been invited by the Gorey School of Art to do a solo show in their amazing space down there. And the show was put off a few times because of the pandemic, and then finally then in summer 21, the show was due to go ahead. So that was called Love Letters to Cardinal Raymo, where I took cues from the letters I'd written for him to build the show. In one of the letters I say, come and like elope with me, leave the Vatican, live with me. I will be your man for the rest of your life. You know you want to. I will decorate and build a beautiful home for us, and I will decorate it to rival the marbles that are in St. Peter's Basilica in Rome. And then in another letter he had kind of died. So this show in Gorey School of Art, the curators there said to me I could do whatever I wanted in the space, that I had 3 weeks to install. I could basically move down, have the keys, do what I wanted. So this was after kind of like a lot of lockdowns and stuff. And I was chomping at the bit. When I was in my studio during the pandemic, I was just like, I made this decision to myself. I was like, oh, I'm sick of this photography stuff. I'm sick of making prints that have to be protected. I just want to go wild in the studio. So I did. In the studio, I kind of like spent the pandemic in the studio just really sloshing paint around like I did in my dad's workshop. And so all the cues were taken from the letters. So the Gorey School of Art was like an incubation, like a production lab, and I was really making a conscious decision to bring painting really to the fore of my practice. And as much as it was a big deal, the show to me, it was one of my first solo shows, I kind of made a promise to myself that I was just going to take a lot of risks, and I was just going to really, really enjoy the actual process. So I made wallpapers. At the back of the Gorey School of Art, there was this big hill of grass. So I brought like rolls and rolls and rolls of lining paper, blank lining paper, rolled them out on the grass, and like was sloshing paint around them, applying it by brushes or pouring it on. And it was kind of a July time. It was really hot, so the paints would. So these are like strips of paper that are kind of that wide, and I'd lie them out on the grass and do whatever. But when it's lying, when the paper's lying, it would kind of crease. It would kind of go up and down in like bumps and lumps and stuff, and the paint would run around, and then the wind would come and blow the paper around, and sort of parts would dry, parts wouldn't dry. So I kind of let the weather do whatever it wanted to those papers. They kind of dried quite quickly, and then they were hung. This is just one element in the space where they were just hung up in a line. So, and I didn't really know what this was about or what I was saying with them. I was kind of loosely emulating church walls, marble, all those kind of things, and it's it ended up being very, very painterly, but the process was very joyful, very enjoyable. And I think that at that time for me that was really important, because it was kind of in the middle of the pandemic, I was having a hard time, like everyone was, and I felt very free to have the keys to this place and do what I wanted in the space of 3 weeks. And I kind of took risks and went mental. Like when you're decorating a house or painting a house or whatever space, you have to make sure all these like fixtures and fittings are kept clean. And I wanted that contrast between all that. Like the sink here has been scrubbed really. Like this is an art colour, so that sink was actually really bad. It was in a really bad way before I even came in to install. But I made a point of like bleaching that out, making it really, really clean, in a contrast to all this other kind of wildness going on. Okay, so that was the Gorey School of Art. So yeah, it was an incubation period for me. It was experimental. I learned a lot from it. I mean, it was one of the highlights of my career so far. So actually, this is actually a photograph. So this is during the pandemic. I was making this work. And I suppose it exemplifies what I was talking about, not being happy with just taking a photograph and putting it on the wall. I wanted to create a photograph. The end product is a photograph, but to get to that end point, there was a lot of work. Taking cues from Cardinal Raymo's capes and dresses and costumes and stuff, I set about a task of making the costume out of canvas and paint myself. So I kind of cut these, like this dress, this is like a kind of dress that has sleeves and goes down out of canvas and painted just to kind of represent loosely the kind of laces you would wear. So that's paint and canvas. Then the cape thing is made out of photographic material of satin. It's like photographs of satins and silks, and it's collaged onto this canvas, as is the background, which is like a curtain, and then at the sides it's painted, and then these are photographic tiles that I made. So I wanted to set this task was that to make this highly produced photograph where I had a lot of engagement with every element in the background, and that was part of the Gorey show as well. My next show after that was Requiem For Raymo in 2022, late 22 to 23. And the ideas for this show, I took a lot of the positives, a lot of the kind of successful things from the Gorey show, and it was letter writing as well, was really part of this as well, a part of generating ideas and kind of helping build the world and helping flesh out the characters. This was like definitely the biggest show I'd done, and the concept behind this, it was Requiem For Raymo. So in the letters he had died. Unfortunately, he's really still alive, but in the letters fictionally, he had died. I killed him off. But our love had never been requited. So I was dealing with this regret that our love had never been, our relationship had never kicked off, we'd never met, and I was in this grief-stricken kind of state where I couldn't accept that he died. Yeah, in one of those letters it was like, I'm waiting for you to come and you're not going to arrive, but I'm still going to decorate this apartment for us and I will keep doing it until the end of time kind of thing. But I took a lot of the successes of the Gorey show, and there was a lot of comments. I probably should have illustrated it better with a better picture, but there was a lot of energy in the Gorey show. I had kind of made the papers and stuff in the space, and I kind of left all the crap lying around, and I made some furniture pieces and I left sawdust around and offcuts around and buckets of water around, and there was smells, and the place really had a kind of multi-sensory kind of feeling about it. And that's one thing a lot of people commented on, and I hadn't thought about that, and people had said it was like you had just left or you were around the corner, or that you were still there because it looked like it wasn't finished kind of thing. So I thought that was really interesting, and I took that on board. Like I had a year to kind of like bring the show to fruition, so I kind of had a lot of time to kind of think about what I wanted. I mean, it's a funereal kind of space. The Cardinal has died. I'm grieving for him. And I suppose I must say at this point as well, I was still making this at like the tail end of the pandemic still, I suppose. I was thinking a lot about grief, and I was thinking a lot about my own grief. My mother and father died, and a niece that died, and I'm kind of approaching 50 at this stage as well, and I'm trying to kind of like make sense of things and trying to kind of like close things off maybe, and kind of come to accept things maybe. So I was thinking about grief a lot while making this show, and I was thinking about I was just thinking about the effect it had on me. I was thinking about how I maybe had dealt with it, and I was bringing that into this fictional story as well. But death and funereal kind of aesthetics were kind of like in my mind as well when I was making the show. There's a bigger element to the show, which was a big video I did. I don't have a clip of that here with me today. So it was a 7-minute video of me in the Cardinal costume. I'll explain about that a bit further as well. That's kind of another thing. I got a costume made out of Painter and Decorators, like a Painter and Decorators dungarees, a Painter and Decorators jacket, in red satin material, the Cardinal red. A painter would always use, like, just wear a plain t-shirt under their kind of dungarees, so I got a plain t-shirt made out of lace, and donned the kind of bejeweled gloves and the Cardinal's hat for this performance video. And the video was just a camera straight on me, in a corner. The video is supposed to encapsulate when I get the news that the Cardinal is dead and how that kind of lands on me. So I'm hearing the news, I'm crying, I'm weeping, I'm bereft, I'm inconsolable, and I acted that all out to camera. It's for 7 minutes, and that looped in one of the spaces of the show, and the sound was quite loud, and it would kind of spill into the other space of the show. That sound, that weeping, that wailing. This is a still from that video. I took the kind of comments that I got from the Gorey School of Show about this energy that had been in the Gorey School of Art show, and I was like, I really want to capitalise on that, and I really want the space of the RHA to have this energy. So I decided I was going to perform in the costume every Friday for the full day, taking down the collaged painted wallpaper on the wall, stripping it down, and when I had it all stripped, I'd start hanging it up again. So it was a durational performance, but it wasn't like this terribly hard Marina Abramovich kind of duration performance. It was like, I'm doing a day's work, like I kind of is part of muscle memory, so it wasn't really a big deal. But I was in the costume. The costume was hanging on the back of this screen here. The screen kind of served a purpose in that I was a place where I got changed behind. All the costume was hanging on the back of it. I don't have a back of it. No, I don't. So I performed that every Friday, and the space accumulated the spoils of all that stripping wallpaper down. In the middle here was a tiled area where I had all the stuff of the painting and decorating industry that I would need, like paint, because I was repainting the walls as well, and wallpaper paste, and the wallpaper stripper was all here. At the start of this is actually I think this is taken the day after the first performance. So this kind of area here in the middle became dirtier and dirtier and dirtier, smellier and smellier. There was kind of stagnant water sitting there throughout the duration of the show. And yeah, it just created this energy. By the end of the show, I performed like 8 Fridays, and the space had been transformed, and the paper was left in piles. And there was buckets of water there, and I realised kind of afterwards when I was kind of reflecting on the show about like a lot of the paint application, the paint that was applied on the wall was very watery, and there was paint running down the walls. There was watery paint on the wallpaper. There was buckets of water. The steam stripper had a lot of water in it, and I kind of like realised it was kind of like metaphor for tears and crying. That was just a bit of genius I had at the end of it. Thanks so much. Thank you.